True, so help you God.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Stand prior.
You may.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please state your full name, spelling your last name for the record?
Anthony Vorres, V as in Victor, O-R-R, E as in Edward, S as in Sam.
What's your date of birth?
10/18/1983,
Where do you live?
in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Do you work?
Yes.
What do you currently do for work?
I am a hotel general manager.
How long have you been a hotel general manager?
For roughly over 3 years.
What are some of your duties?
I manage all aspects of a hotel operation, from guest facing to the back of house operations and all fiscal responsibilities of the property.
How long have you been in the hotel business?
Roughly 11 years.
Turning your attention to May of 2020, where were you working at that time?
The Residence Inn in Dedham,
Where is that located?
in Dedham, Massachusetts.
Do you know what street it's on?
I do not.
If I said 259 Elm Street, would that help refresh your recollection?
Yes.
How long have you been working at the hotel in May of 2020?
For a short period of time, I was there on a task force assignment. The property did not have a general manager at the time, so I was overseeing the property until the full-time general manager could be found and hired, which that individual was hired roughly around March. And due to the onset of the pandemic, I had to stay at the property because my original property couldn't afford to have me come back at the time.
So to be clear, you started at the hotel before the pandemic hit in March of 2020, is that right?
Correct, roughly 2 weeks before the beginning of the pandemic.
And then once the pandemic hit, you were sort of forced to stay at the Residence Inn, is that right?
Yes, and when the new full-time general manager started, I stayed there in a support role, just helping with essential basic duties.
Can you describe the hotel?
Yes, it was an extended stay property, meaning that it was mostly for long-term guests. I can't recall how many rooms it was, but it was a nice, quiet property.
How many entrances and exits did the property have?
There was the main doors, and from what I recall, exit doors on both ends of the left and right of the building.
And in May of 2020, was there anything special about the main entrance based on the pandemic?
Yes, starting with the pandemic, the front doors were locked and guests needed to be walked in or buzzed in.
Would they be able to enter with their key card?
Yes, after check-in, they've been able to retrieve a key card, yes.
And in May of 2020, what was your role at the hotel at that point?
I was just there as essentially support. The general manager had been found, but because I couldn't go back to my property, I just assisted wherever the general manager asked me, whether it was covering the front desk or helping with other miscellaneous tasks.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you would do when you were in charge of covering the front desk?
Checking people in, checking people out, answering the phones. It was different from normal times because of the pandemic. It was a lot less formal, and because there was a smaller flow of guest traffic because of the pandemic, it was really just kind of manning the desk and just assisting the small amount of people that were coming through and leaving.
When you say it was a lot less formal, what do you mean?
In the sense that, normally a typical front desk, you're not sitting down or, you're dressed less formally just because of those small little things.
Can you explain to us what the process of checking someone in looks like?
Yes, normally you ask for identification, a form of payment, and essentially that's it. Those are the two key components.
At the time, how were reservations maintained? Was it a computer system, paper, or something else?
Computer system.
And are records of reservations routinely kept in the normal course of business at
Yes.
the hotel?
Yes.
And what do those records normally reflect?
The guest's name, their arrival date, their checkout date, any particular notes that the guest would like included on the reservation.
Turning your attention to May 2020, were you working on that day?
Yes.
At approximately 3:34 p.m., did you receive a reservation made under the name of Ingolf Tuerk?
Yes.
How was it made, if you can remember?
From what I recall, I believe he called into the hotel, seeing if we were open. A lot of hotels had closed during the pandemic, and I do recall making the reservation for him over the phone.
So you took that phone call?
Yes.
When was the reservation made for, if you can remember?
I can't recall the exact dates. I would say sometime in May.
And would the reservation information help refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
May.
Your Honor, just for the record, I agree with the exhibit as far as record kept in ordinary course of business.
All right. Do you want me to make a finding, or you're agreeing
It's up
to
to
it?
you, Judge. I'm just saying, I have no objection to
All right.
the document. That's all.
I'm handing you what was pre-marked as Commonwealth's Exhibit 279. If you could take a look at that, please. Do you recognize it?
I do.
What do you recognize it to be?
A reservation for a Marriott-based property management system.
And when was the reservation made for?
It was made for May the 8th through May the 17th.
Who was the reservation's name under?
Ingolf Tuerk.
And were you working on May 8th when the defendant checked in?
Yes.
Do you see him in the courtroom?
Yes.
And could you please identify him with an article of clothing that he's wearing?
A striped tie, blue.
Your Honor, could the record please reflect identification?
Yes.
I would just note for the record, Your Honor, identification is not an issue, so it's not necessary to keep going through that.
All right.
What phone number was given for the reservation?
617-694-8962.
And what other information does that reservation contain about anybody else staying in the room?
Katie Tuerk, also in room, okay to give keys.
When the defendant checked in on May 8th of 2020, can you please explain what happened to the best of your recollection?
From what I recall, I let Mr. Tuerk into the hotel to check in, and I checked him in. And then I recall Mrs. Tuerk coming into the hotel afterwards.
Do you remember what she looked like?
Kind of reddish brownish hair, tall, slender.
What type of surveillance video did the hotel have in May of 2020?
There was a camera system. I can't recall how many cameras, but it was housed in the back of house. Is usually accessible by the property, the general manager. And it had footage of the check-in counter, various hallways, and other public access points.
What about the parking lot? Was there any camera?
I don't recall.
What about where the guest rooms are? Do you recall if there were any cameras in the hallways where the guest rooms were located?
Possibly. For that property specifically, I can't remember.
What about the camera in the front entranceway? Was there a camera there?
Yes.
And have you had the opportunity to review the surveillance video from May 8th of 2020 when you checked in the defendant and Katie Tuerk?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, could you please put Exhibit 278 on the screen?
Okay. And again, this has been agreed to?
Yes, Judge, I agree to all the videos.
Do you want the lights turned down?
Please, Your Honor. And that video we just watched, is that a fair and accurate representation of the defendant walking into the hotel on May 8th of 2020 in order to
Yes.
check in?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if you could please play the next video. Gilman, if you could please play the next video. And was that the woman who you described as Katie Tuerk?
Yes.
On the video with the defendant?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Gilman, could you please play the next video? And is that just that video that was just shown, is that just a different angle of the defendant checking in on May 8th of 2020?
Correct.
Who else was in that video?
Prior?
Besides the defendant, who else? Were you seen in the video?
Yes, myself, yes. Yeah.
And I noticed that there was some plexiglass across the reservation. Was that always in place?
For the pandemic, yes, because it was the early time of the pandemic.
So that plexiglass was placed after the pandemic hit, is that correct?
Correct.
In that video, we also noticed that you got up from your seat behind the reservation desk and walked over to the door. What were you doing at that time?
So let Mr. Tuerk in.
And is that because the doors still had to be locked because of the pandemic?
Correct.
I have no further questions for this witness.
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you.